Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live right here on Giants.com and the Giants mobile app. Lance Medow, John Schmeelk with you. Big Blue Kickoff Live is brought to you by Pepsi Zero Sugar, new and improved. Zero never tasted so good. Giants, Lance, heading into the divisional playoffs, taking on the Philadelphia Eagles on Saturday night. This is my favorite playoff weekend of the year. I say it every year. You get four usually good games between four good teams, and I think we're going to get the same this weekend. And we'll dig into some of the matchups here. I've done that with Jonathan yesterday, and we did a little earlier in the week too. But just from a big picture perspective, there are a lot of teams that'll win one playoff game in a year. They'll lose, then, the next year they'll disappear out of the playoffs. Not to say winning one playoff game is not a big deal. It is, especially given the fact that Giants hadn't won one since 2011. But once you start talking about NFC title games, that's a whole nother level. Like, this is a level-setting game for the Giants. We talked about it last week, playing the Vikings. I thought it was a coin toss game. I think you thought it was similar, right? Whichever team played better was going to win. This is a different ball game. You're playing the 1 seed, the Eagles, top 2, 3, 1 team in the NFL, not just the conference the whole year. Clearly the best team in the NFC from start to finish until those last few games when Jalen Hurts was hurt. So this is I think, obviously the most important part is getting to the NFC title game here and having a chance to go to the Super Bowl. But I think it also is going to show you how far this team really has come in the last month since they started playing better football off of that winless streak they had heading into that Washington game.
Well, because a lot has changed, really, for both teams. The Eagles are a bit banged up with Jalen Hurts coming off that sprained shoulder. He's not on the practice report, but we haven't seen him since that Week 18 game. And then the Giants, they were able to rest their starters. It benefited them clearly last week based on their level of performance, but they're also a different team from the one that lost to the Eagles in a lopsided affair in Week 14. Yep. So you look at both regular season games, and you can make arguments to put a little substance in both of them, and then you could say we're going to completely remove the substance from both of them.
It's totally different than the Viking games last week, where you could really look at that Christmas Eve game and say, all right, this is going to be pretty similar, and I think it was. I'm not completely throwing these first two games out, but like you said, the last game of the year, I think you completely toss out. No starters for the Giants.
Yeah, there's nothing to take away from that.
I don't take that seriously at all. And I think the first game, you see the things that the Giants can't do if they want a chance to win this game. They can't give up 250 yards rushing. They can't give up 3 30-plus yard touchdowns, which happened in that game. These are things.
They can't turn the ball over, too.
Correct. And they can't let Daniel Jones get sacked seven times in that game, right? Can't do any of that if you want to win the game. So that's how I kind of look at that first matchup. But to your point, the Eagles were playing their best football then. They're not playing as well now as they were then. The Giants are playing much better football now than they were then. So that's why I think, to me, this is a whole new ball game. It's a fresh start. These teams are very familiar with each other, but this team, I think, takes on a completely different life of its own that's different than the first two matchups.
Well, the Eagles have a much better defense than the Vikings. It's not even close. I mean, this is a real push up. I mean, you were talking about it's a defining moment for the Giants. Well, it's also a defining moment for their offense to continue to produce at the level they've done over the last few weeks. And I do think they're playing their best offensive football. I don't even think it's close.
Nope.
It's been consistent. They've reached 30 points twice in the last 3 games. All encouraging factors. You see them win with the ground game the conventional way, with Daniel Jones as a runner, as well as Daniel Jones being able to spread the wealth. So very encouraging signs across the board. But it's one thing to do that, okay? In fairness, perspective is needed against the Minnesota Vikings twice and the Indianapolis Colts. It's another thing to do that against a very good Philadelphia defense, which has playmakers across the board. So this is going to be another one of those litmus tests. Okay, can this offense produce at that level regardless of the opposition? That's what I'm very interested to see. But I want to get back to my point about the turnovers.
And by the way, 100% agree with you. I'm board 100%.
We were talking about you can never turn the ball over. That goes without saying. But with Minnesota, it was more of, okay, you don't need a takeaway. You just need to make sure you protect the football because both of these teams are very close. And as long as you protect the football, you're going to be able to maximize your possessions and you're going to be able to beat the Vikings in a very close game. That's exactly what happened in the playoff game. You take away those 2 turnovers in Minnesota territory that happened in the regular season, completely different ball game, right?
The Giants, punt, right?
Yeah, the Giants, though, put the Vikings in a position where they had to go the distance of the field and score as opposed to set up for a field goal. So there's that fine margin, that thin line that we're talking about.
Yep.
With the Eagles, The difference, the way that I look at it is, you have to prevent yourself from turning over the ball to keep the game competitive and close. Because the Eagles, if they shorten that field and they get a sack or a strip sack, and all of a sudden you give Jalen Hurts 30 yards to work with, more than often than not, the Eagles are going to capitalize. So to me, the turnover conversation is more about making sure you stay within striking distance with Philadelphia, as opposed to with the Vikings. It was more of the difference between winning or losing on the final drive.
And Pearson, don't cut this because they'll probably come back to haunt me. But if the Giants go -2 in this game turnover ratio, you can start doing your draft prep on Monday.
I don't disagree with you at all. Yeah, because I think there's a huge difference between protecting the ball against the Eagles versus the Vikings.
And the Eagles are much better at taking it away. They're a top
very
five,
opportunistic.
Tied for third or fourth. I got to double check what the number is in terms of takeaways. They were one of the best ratios in the league most of the year, though it kind of came back to earth in that last month of the year a little
Specifically
bit.
the last 4 games.
What was the ratio in the first game in Week 14, turnover-wise?
Week 14, it was actually -1.
Okay.
But I count the punt issue. I mean, that's a turnover,
it's a
right?
turnover,
And the Eagles
absolutely,
scored a touchdown on the
All right,
very
so
next play.
-2.
-2 if you want to look at it through that lens.
In reality.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and look, the game can get away from you quick. You can't give the Eagles anything easy in this game. You have to make them work for everything that they get, and the Giants can't make mistakes. They have to. I will say it again. Said it with Jonathan yesterday. I'll say it again with you today. The Giants have to play their best football game they've played all year round, all year long. They have to play better than they did against Baltimore. They have to play better than they did against Green Bay. They have to play better than they did against Minnesota last week. And I think those are probably their 3 best victories, right? They play better than they did when they beat Washington in that big game. Got to play better than you did in all of those games if you want to go into Philadelphia in a playoff environment and win the game. I'm assuming here, Lance, and this is going to be a big deciding factor in how this game is going to be played, and this is how we'll treat it today, and, maybe we'll be wrong, and then we can talk about it differently on Monday. Jalen Hurts is going to try to be Jalen Hurts. They're going to use him I think they're going to try to use him like they used him all year. He basically said, look, I'm going to play my game. It's the playoffs. And if I get hurt, I get hurt. That's basically what he said at his press conference this week. Now, maybe he tries to play the way he plays, and in the second quarter, re-aggravates the shoulder and Gardner Minshew's in the game. That's possible. So that's why I think early in this game, it is important to hit him a little bit and, kind of see where he's at in this game. So how good is Jalen Hurts? Because if Jalen Hurts is MVP Jalen Hurts, the difficulty level's back up to 10. If he's week 18 Jalen Hurts, then maybe your difficulty level's at 7 instead of 9 or 10, at least in terms of defending the Eagles' offense. Because for me, and Jalen Hurts has made a lot of progress throwing the football, by the way. He's been great all year. All the credit to the man. He's been wonderful. In that Week 18 game, I didn't think he had as much zip on the ball as he did before the injury. But more importantly, I think generally speaking with the Eagles' offense, Lance, Hurts' ability to run the ball really is the linchpin to everything that they do. It opens up the run game with Miles Sanders, right? He can keep the ball on the read options and run. Makes it easier on Miles Sanders. Makes it easier on the offensive line, right? Because all right, you let one guy get in there. Well, he's mobile enough to get out of there and break a tackle and go run for a first down or make a play. He makes it easier on the receivers because opponents can't play a lot of man-to-man defense because then their backs are turned and Jalen Hurts can go run for 1 billion first downs. You can spy him, but then that takes someone else out of coverage. So his ability to run, and by the way, it's the same thing for Daniel Jones, and I think Daniel Jones has to have a big game with his legs for the Giants to win this game too. Same impact. Jalen Hurts' ability to run and run like Jalen Hurts wants to run. He wants to run like a running back, right? He's 220.
He's built like it.
You've seen all the squatting videos at Alabama. He wants to run over people. If he's that guy, it makes the Eagles' offense so much more difficult to deal with. If he's the guy that's going to slide when a guy gets within 3 or 4 yards of him, then he's not as dangerous. So whether he's able to execute that, I think, really is going to impact in a lot of ways how this Eagles offense can function.
Well, there is no tomorrow for the Eagles because if they lose, then obviously they're not going to be able to have another game. So I would think that Hurts and the Eagles are going to adopt the philosophy of he's going to lay it all out on the line. And if he re-aggravates himself, they're going to have to worry about that with respect to the next round. But I am expecting to see a different Jalen Hurts from Week 18. Now, whether or not he has more zip on the ball, that remains to be seen. What I'm expecting to see is a guy that's willing to run. That's my point because I do think the Eagles' offense is completely different when he looks to run, and I've brought this up multiple times. I'll say it again. It's very similar to the Ravens. You take Lamar Jackson off the field, they're a completely different offense. You put Lamar Jackson on the field, now you have to account for every single time he snaps the ball. Lamar could take off. Every time you snap the ball to Jalen Hurts, Jalen could take off. So you have to account for one or two running backs in the backfield, depending on the personnel they have out on the field, or the quarterback taking off. If you don't have to worry about Jalen Hurts running, and I don't think the Giants defense needed to do that, I mean, you're talking about that's one less headache that you have to worry about. So if I'm the Eagles, I'm having a serious conversation about how many runs you want to give Jalen Hurts, how many hits you're willing for him to absorb as a runner, and then pick your spots throughout the game to determine whether you want to do that. Because if the Giants get a good read on the fact that Hurts is unwilling to run, then it completely changes the game. Now this becomes more of a conventional rushing attack for the Eagles, so you're more concerned about bottling up Miles Sanders, not letting him get some of those big runs, and then you hope that you can man up on the A.J. Browns and the Devontae Smiths of the world if you don't have to worry about it.
You can focus a lot more on the receivers if you don't have to worry about it.
And Dallas Goedert, let's not forget, he didn't 100%. Play in that Week 14
And Chris Watkins, who's also a good player.
Sure, he can stretch the field as well.
Follow the Giants on Twitter and retweet to earn a $100 Team Store gift card and Modelo prize pack. For every point the Giants score, one lucky fan will win. 31 fans won last week because the Giants scored 31 points. Drink responsibly. Modelo Especial beer, imported by Crown Imports, Chicago, Illinois, 21 plus. All right, let's get to the phones in just a minute at 201-939-4513. Last thing I want to throw at you, Lance, before we get there, and I asked Jonathan this question yesterday, I'll throw it to you now. What do you think this Giants offense and defensive approaches are going to look like in this game? You know, I think you'll probably see more blitzing against the Eagles than we saw against Minnesota last week. That was their low ebb of the year in terms of blitzes. So I imagine we're going to get a little bit more of that. Are we going to get back up to that 50% area? I don't know. I'm not sure if you are. You know, they blitzed the you-know-what out of Jalen Hurts in that first game, and it did not go well.
Yeah. He made him pay for that.
And now Hurts has not been great under pressure this year. I think we've all seen the stats posted on Twitter and all that stuff. But, you know, I think maybe they'll back it off a little bit. But I do expect there to be more pressure than we saw against Minnesota 2 weeks ago. And then offensively, Lance, for me, again, number one rated pass defense in the league. 70 sacks for the pass rush. They got 1 million guys inside and outside. I could sit here and think the rest of the show to list all of them. Bradbury, Slay, they're good cover corners. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's back. He's playing the slot for them now with Vontae Maddox not playing. He's a good player. You know, Epps is a good safety. Blankenship's doing a nice job back there too. You know, there aren't a ton of weaknesses on this Eagles defense. So I think the Giants are going to have to, it's going to have to be more of a run game this week, a little bit. You know, this can't be a 45 drop back game for Daniel Jones. That could get ugly real quick with that pass rush. It really can. So for me, I think it has to be a little bit more Barkley, a little more DJ with the run. And can Evan Neal hold up against Hassan Reddick and Brandon Graham? You know, that he couldn't the first time they played. Can he do it this week? And then on the other side, the other matchup I'm watching, and I put this in my preview, which is on Giants.com. I tweeted it out earlier in the week. Go check it out. Dexter Lawrence has to win against Jason Kelce. He doesn't have to dominate Jason Kelce. Kelce's too good. I don't expect him to dominate a future Hall of Famer. But he's got to win. You know, we got to notice him. I said to Jonathan yesterday, the term I use, he has to be noisy. We can't get to the third quarter in here and be like, has Dexter Lawrence made a lot of plays? Have you really noticed him doing a whole lot? He's so important against the run of the pass. Those are the things for me. Your thoughts on either team matchup or offensive or defensive approach?
Well, on the offensive side of the ball, I think they do have to run the football. The only caveat that I'll add is if they use Saquon as a receiver and he's getting 3-4 yards on a short reception, that's an extension of the run game. So it doesn't necessarily have to be all run. It's just you've got to avoid the third and longs. So however you get there, it doesn't matter to me. Whether you want to dump it off to the running back, you want to dump it off to a wide receiver on a screen so you get 4 to 5 yards, just stay in that 3rd and 7 and lower barometer. If it becomes a 3rd and 9...
I like it at 5 and lower, to be honest with you.
Well, 7, I think, at least gives you a reasonable shot to get a first down. But more than 7, I think you're playing right into the hands of that Eagles pass rush, and that's going to be a troublesome area. And yes, Daniel gets into that 40 pass attempt territory. That probably means that the Giants are playing from behind for the bulk of the game, and the Eagles are going to have their fair share of chances to maybe not even blitz. You know, I mean, they can win with their front 4. They don't even have to be that aggressive.
They don't blitz a lot.
That's what I'm saying.
And they don't stunt a lot. They just say, all right, we're going to line our guys up against you one-on-one, and we trust our guys to win.
Because they also trust Bradbury and Slay and all the other guys in the secondary, too. So you're not going to then put the Eagles in a precarious spot where you're going to make them get out of character. That's more of a reason why you have to stay in manageable third downs and a combination of the run or Saquon as a receiver. As far as Defense, see, I think Leonard Williams is the X factor because I could see the Eagles doubling Dexter and trying to completely take him out of the game and assigning help for Jason Kelce. So Leonard gets maybe some favorable one-on-one matchups. He has to win. Leonard Williams has to be the disruptive force in this game because I think Philadelphia knows what Dexter Lawrence is all about. They watched the film. Remember, he was the one that made the hit on Kirk Cousins or could have brought him down via sack. That's why he had to get rid of the football on the 4th and 8. This has a Leonard Williams game written all over it. And the reason being, also keep in mind, Azeez Ojulari's dealing with a quad injury. We don't know how effective he's going to be. He's going to give it a go. We just don't know snap count-wise.
Only guy in the Giants injury report, by the way.
So if Dex is going to get doubled and Azeez is battling injury, I think all signs point to Leonard Williams. He needs to step it up. He needs to have a disruptive game. I'll word it like that. And if he can make his presence felt, then the Eagles have to say to themselves, do we double Dexter Lawrence or do we now need to put more attention to Leonard Williams? That's why I think he's the X factor.
And that'll probably be Landon Dickerson that he's going to be lined up against in those one-on-one opportunities. Usually I think Leonard is to the right side of the defense, but he could also be on Seumalo, who's a good guard.
Sure.
Both these guys are good
the
players.
Eagles' offensive line entirely is good.
They're good. But yeah, look. You got those, you're right. And I shouldn't have left Leonard out because he was also very good against Minnesota in the first playoff.
Yeah, and he didn't play, remember, against the Eagles yet this season.
Right. And by the way, neither did McKinney and neither did Adoree Jackson in that first game. Another reason why I think this is kind of a whole new ball game here. All right, let's get to it, folks. 201-939-4513. 201-939-4513. Let's go back to the phones, but first a reminder, go subscribe to the Giants Huddle podcast. You have rapid reactions after each game. This week will be Sean O'Hara with our very own Madeline Burke. We have an episode midweek featuring an interview with a national analyst. This week it was Mike Mayock. Go check it out. It was a really good talk. He really gets into the X's and O's on the matchup this week. And then we have an interview with a current Giant player. We do Adoree Jackson this week. We talk about the matchup last week against Justin Jefferson, how it was a team effort to slow him down, and Adoree goes out of his way to point. People keep telling me I shut him down. We it's a zone, and we had a lot of guys helping here, which is true when you watch the tape. Absolutely, the safeties was there all game to help him out, which is great scheme. We have our Eagles preview on that same podcast with Adoree. Lance and Paul talk to Zach Berman from The Athletic, and then Bob Papa with Brian Dable. So again, go find the Giants Huddle podcast. It's great content. It's on the Giants app, giants.com/podcast, or search and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Alrighty, let's get to it. Alan in Washington, D.C. will lead us off. Hey, Alan.
Hey, what's up, guys? How you doing, man?
What's up?
Doing all right.
Super excited. We're in this position this late in the season and in the playoffs, and, we're going against somebody we know very well, somebody who has had our number for a long time, especially at the link. I think, I'm not sure if you guys know, do you remember the last time we won?
Yeah, 2013 in Philadelphia. That was the last time. They've lost 9 in a row in Philly.
Okay, so basically 10 years we've lost it. So, yeah, I mean, this is a game. I think it's going to be fought, but I just hope we can limit the guys like Miles Sanders. I think he's had tremendous success against us, and he killed us that first game. And for some reason, I don't know that the smaller guy, I think his name is Scott.
Boston Scott.
Yeah.
Yep.
He does some amazing things for his size. I mean, just scoring touchdowns when you least expect them. He had a couple returns on us, like from special teams, that really threw us off. And I feel like we got to limit those kind of guys. I know that A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are going to get theirs in the receiving, and you just got to do your best with them. But we cannot get that guy. Who's that guy? I think his name is Reddick.
Hassan Reddick. Yeah. He
leads the team in sacks.
16 sacks.
Yeah, he's a beast, man. And let's give proper respect to the Eagles. I know that as a lot of Giants fans, we don't like the Eagles and they don't like us. It's fine, but you got to respect what they've done this year. I come from, I hope the Giants win, but I think it's going to be in the Eagles' favor. But I think if we have a group of guys that can do it, it's this group. I mean, DJ's. He's striding in the right direction. That stiff arm he did against Peterson, I think, against the Vikings, I think that really set the tone for that game. And I think he needs to play like that this year and in this game. And I feel like if we have a chance, we have to hit Hurts as much as we can. And that's it for you guys. But go Giants, and thanks for the program and everything you guys do.
Hey, thank you for listening and calling it out. And look, I think you hit it. It's going to be a really tough game. The Giants have to play really well. They can't make mistakes. And at some point in this game, Lance, and I say this with some level of confidence, we're going to need to see either on offense or defense or both, 1, 2, or 3 guys make an above the X's and O's play where you're like, wow, there wasn't a whole lot there, but they created something there.
Well, all those things add up, especially against a Philadelphia team. I mean, the other thing, just listening to the last caller, we didn't talk about any special teams mishaps against the Vikings, and that was key. You didn't give gifts to Kirk Cousins and company on a short field. You can't do that for Philadelphia. See, the Vikings, they had to go 75 yards on all of their touchdown drives. You want to put Philadelphia in the same position.
Now, I imagine it's probably going to be a little bit tougher for Graham Gano to kick the ball out of the end zone on all these kickoffs.
Well, we're talking about outdoors.
Being outdoors,
yeah,
correct.
Absolutely. But, all right, can you at least not give up a return?
Oh,
is
sure,
what I'm saying.
100%.
Or a turnover. You know, I understand you're talking about the kicking. I'm just talking about not giving up an explosive play.
Well, I mean, I could give you
that facet.
I could tell you why they didn't have a lot of mishaps on special teams against the Vikings.
Well, because it went into the end zone.
Yeah, well, they only had one kickoff return, and they only punted twice.
Of course. No,
So
there weren't many at-bats, opportunities. No,
And
but you know what? Hey, if you could do that again against Philadelphia, so be it.
Did the Vikings even have a punt and return, or was it a fair catch and a down ball? I don't remember.
It was that fumble, right?
That's right, yeah.
Oh,
but they
you're right.
recovered it.
That's right.
They recovered
Good call.
it.
I think that was the one return they had, Pearson. I forgot about that.
That was
Good
pretty
call
much
on that.
it. Yeah, I don't remember there being a high volume of opportunities.
So, like I said, and Howard always says this constantly from the sideline to me during the game, so he's not here. I will echo him. Just get touchbacks. Just get touchbacks. Just get touchbacks. There's no reason to mess around there.
No, I mean, why give them a chance? Yeah. Sure. No, I completely understand that, but sometimes you have the expectancy to kick it into the end zone, and it doesn't go right. So you got to be prepared accordingly, and that's all I'm saying.
So we had Hugo call up yesterday. I'll throw this at you real quick, and then we'll get to you next, Abdul. He said the whole game, and I kind of said, maybe in the big spot at the end of the game, if the Giants are down, they're returning a kickoff. Do you put Saquon back there?
I mean, here's the thing. In the playoffs, if Brian Dable is somebody that preaches it's consistent, you do what works for you in the regular season.
You don't want to make the change?
Why would you make that change? That would be my argument. You're now,
That's fair.
not to say that I don't trust Barkley. You know me. I'm a big proponent of putting your best players on special teams. You don't have to convince me.
I know I don't.
I'm just saying that if you haven't exposed him to that in a game setting in quite some time, and you pick a playoff game
that's fair.
of all, I don't really love that situation.
I think that's fair. I think that's a good answer.
On the topic, I just looked it up. So Rager had one punt return, but he got nothing out of it. And then Wang Wu won for 24 yards on a kick return.
Yeah, I think, didn't Rager, he might have muffed that, actually, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
I believe so.
Yeah, that was the muff. And then I remember, I remember during the broadcast, we went to break right after the punt, and I said to Pop in his ear, I'm like, would you really trust Jalen Rager to handle the football in a playoff game if you're the Vikings?
Well, you're talking about the drops as a receiver.
I mean,
Philadelphia.
I mean, he and then he had the play too where he stopped running the route. Remember, and then it turned into an interception. In the game. So yeah. Anyway, Abdul in Minneapolis. He's up next. Hey, Abdul.
Hey guys, what's up?
You must have been walking around all week with your chest puffed out, wearing your Giants blue. You must have been pumped.
Yeah, I live right by the stadium, and I was also at the game, and it's been a good week.
I can imagine.
I'm 2 for 2 for Giants playoff games. I was also at the 2007 Green Bay Ice Bowl.
Well, you coming to Philadelphia?
I don't go to Philly, man.
Wow. So you were at the Ice Bowl. You were at the 2007 freezing game, huh?
Yep, I was there.
Boy.
Because that's the year I first moved to Minneapolis, and I'm like, I just drove to Green Bay and got a ticket and froze my ass off. But it was great.
Well, you should be used to it based on the weather in Minneapolis.
Yeah, it's true.
Something tells me it's not your first cup of tea in that department.
Exactly. So I've called for two things. So you guys have been covering it all morning so far. How the Giants team is completely different now than that it was an either game. You know, the first game we had all the injuries. That's the obvious one. And second of all, the Giants' offense has changed a lot since then.
Yep.
You know, back then we did a lot more running, a lot more play action, rollout. And now we've gone to more of a traditional drop back, passing attack with Daniel throwing more. and and just doing more of a traditional drop back pass.
Yeah, what I am curious to see though, Abdul, is how much of that was matchup based against the Vikings and the Colts, and by the way, that's when they've been asked about it this week. That's basically what Brian Dable and Mike Kafka has said in terms of the offense being a little bit different the last few weeks, that it was matchup-based. So I'm actually really curious because you could be right. I don't know the answer to this. I'm curious to see if we continue to see that trend against an Eagles team that's much better against the pass than they are against the run.
Right, but the film is out there. You know what I mean? Like, so they're preparing for that.
No, for sure.
It's an extra wrinkle that we didn't have in the first two games.
Absolutely.
And also, I'm not sure if I'm doing making up revisionist history here, but Cordell Slot kind of reminds me of Corey Webster, and should be used that same way. Because I remember Corey's first year, I think it was 2007, he kind of was burnt during the regular season, and then he upped his game in the playoffs. And actually, that game, Favre's last pass as a Packer was to Corey Webster, interception. And I've noticed, I'm not saying start Slot, but I think Slot could be used a lot more in this game because his main detraction is that he's kind of slightly built.
But he has length though to make up for that.
Yeah, he is long.
Yeah.
That's true.
Right, but Devontae Adams is also kind of slight, so they could use him on him. I'm not saying one-on-one, but I'm saying his skill set could really help this game.
Now, I will say this, too. Just remember, Abdul, he played 3 snaps in that game last week. So he was behind. Right. He was the 4th cornerback on the depth chart. Because Nick McLeod played almost 30% of the snaps.
And it was because Fabian Moreau had the hip issue.
You beat me to the punch. Yeah. The only reason he got on the field at the end of the game is because Moreau went out. And by the way, Webster was not a rookie in 07. He was drafted in 05. But you're right. He was deactivated for a couple games earlier in that 2007 season. Then he came back and was a huge factor in the playoffs. So, yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
But if I'm not mistaken, I think Slot played in the last game against Philly, and he did all right. I think he played really well.
Yeah, he was fine. He was fine.
Yeah, so that's why I just think, at this point, and I think you guys have mentioned this, we need to shoot all our bullets. You know what I mean?
But Abdul, I'm going to throw something else at you here. Do you want him in there for Darnay Holmes or Fabian Moreau? Who do you want him in there for?
I think he's better outside. I'm not sure. That's a great question. You know what? I didn't really think about that. I really haven't seen him play much slot. I think he's played mostly outside this year, right?
Yeah, I would be worried about putting him in there for Holmes, and here's why. Darnay Holmes has had some issues with some defensive penalties in the defensive backfield this year, holding pass interference. But he's been an excellent tackler around the line of scrimmage. And against an Eagles team that's going to run a lot, and, Cordell Flott's literally like 170 pounds soaking wet. I don't love him in run support against that Eagles run game. So if I were to use him, I'm with you. I would probably put him outside. But honestly, he's really like 4th on the depth chart right now. So I don't see that happening. And Fabian Moreau did well last week. I mean, he didn't really give up any catches. Think about it. They had Justin Jefferson doubled all game. They went to Hawkinson a lot. Adam Thielen didn't carve them up.
Same thing with Osborne.
And Osborne didn't carve him up either. So I don't want to take Fabian Moreau off the field. He's done a good job.
Fair enough. And you were right. I was going to mention about Holmes, how he's been blowing up those screen passes and being a great run supporter. So Holmes. But did someone mention? But Holmes has this propensity of these late game holding calls that just terrify me. But you know what?
Well, you talk about the Tennessee game early in the season. I mean, that was obviously the most noticeable one on that final drive.
He's had a couple since then, too.
Sure. Yeah, but I mean, I don't remember anything recently, though.
Well, here's what happens. Look, there's a lot of times at the end of these games, and again, Wink has bucked his trends a little bit the last few weeks, but he will tend, when things are on the line in 2-minute situations, to bring a lot of heat. And a lot of times, other teams will put their best wide receiver in the slot in those situations.
You're on an
island.
Got
Darnay Holmes with a 2-way go in the slot against the other team's best wide receiver, which, quite frankly, I don't know if there's any player that can hold up in those spots, so I'm not going to kill Holmes for that. But I think, Abdul, that's why you've seen him get some of those penalties late, because he gets put in tough situations based on how Wink Martindale's want to call the game.
Exactly. But I brought up slot because I saw that the other Moreau, if I'm not pronouncing his name right, he's on the injured list, or he's limited practice.
Yeah, he was limited in practice, but he was not on the final injury report, so he should be a full go.
Yeah, he does not have an injury designation. He was just obviously limited throughout the course of the week leading up, but they decided that they don't need to give him a status, so he should be good to go. And Holmes is second on the team in terms of accepted penalties with 7, and his last penalty was against the Indianapolis Colts 3 weeks ago. He had a defensive holding penalty in that game.
All right, great.
Just to give you an idea.
I'm so excited about it. I can't wait till this day, tomorrow. And,
all right, Abdul.
So you guys take care.
You too.
I hope I talk to you guys next week. We're all happy, all right?
Well, yeah. Well, call back anyway. We'll be on. For the folks, by the way, we probably have some new listeners. Big Blue Kickoff Live is on all year round, man. So even if the season ends this weekend, hopefully, knock on wood that it doesn't, we'll be back next week wrapping up the season. Then we'll start getting into, free agency. We do a lot of heavy draft stuff here to get ready for the offseason. So even if, you don't like to tune in for the games and all that stuff, stick around for the offseason. We actually, I think, do some of our best work in the offseason, to be honest with you. We really kind of get in-depth on a lot of stuff in terms of team building and the draft and free agency, and I think we do a good job with it, and I think we have a lot of fun as well. Hey, Giant fans, take your fandom to the next level with a season ticket membership. Stay connected to the club all year round, not just on game days. Memberships are now available for the 2023 season. To learn more about all the exclusive member benefits, visit Giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. Jonathan in Westchester joins us next. Hey, Jonathan.
Hey, how are you guys?
What's up?
So I called in last Friday, and we won last weekend, so I figured had to call in again today.
All right.
Joe Shane's signing of Isaiah Hodgins, it just looks like a better and better move with every passing week.
Yeah.
I was looking at Over the Cap, and it says that he'll be an exclusive rights free agent after this season.
Yeah, he was a day 3 pick, so the Giants should have him under their control for one more year because this is his 3rd year in the league, if I have that correct.
Yeah, he was a 2026 rounder.
Mm-hmm.
And that's amazing. So my understanding of that is that as an exclusive rights free agent,
he'll be back.
Yeah, it's very unlikely a guy who's an exclusive free agent.
Yeah, he'll be back.
Winds up leaving. Yeah, I mean, you have good control in retaining.
Yeah, and you aren't going to have to pay him a lot of money for him to be back either. So don't worry about that.
Yeah. What a great find he's been. I mean, what a pleasant surprise. So.
Yep.
Well, he knows the system. I mean, that's the big difference. He was with Dable.
Hey, look, and
he knows the scheme.
And he's been hurt his first 2 years. He never really had a chance to play.
Yeah.
He had a shoulder injury. I'm trying to remember what his injury his first season was. I think it was a knee. But yeah, look, Jonathan, he's been great. He brings size. He's been a good route runner. He catches the ball when it's thrown to him. He doesn't have that, burner speed to kind of, win deep over the top a ton, but he's got separation on some double moves. So I think he's shown himself to be a pretty good, crafty wide receiver that makes plays and knows how to use his length and also can create some separation. He's been great.
And he makes plays in the red zone, most important. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's able to finish drives. He's had a touchdown 5 of the last 6 games. You brought up the size. I think that gets overlooked. He's very attractive from that standpoint. But you talk to a lot of guys on offense, they tell you, and they were here during training camp, he wasn't, that Hodgins is still giving them tips on the offensive scheme because he's been exposed to it in Buffalo. Dable, I understand he's now working with Kafka, but some of the principles of the framework is what Dable worked with in Buffalo. So he's almost an extension of the coaching staff,
look, he's young, but he's very crafty. He understands how to play the position. He understands route running, and I think, especially in the red zone lands, that's one of the reasons why he can be so effective down there.
That's great. All right, well, thank you guys. Great job, and let's go Giants.
Thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate the call. And we'll try to do rapid fire for the last half hour here, by the way, folks. Let's go to Scott in New Mexico next. Scott, what's going on?
Hi, guys. How you doing today?
Yo.
Good night.
I don't know if you mentioned T.J. Edwards, who has 160 tackles.
He's that linebacker.
Yeah, he's excellent too, Scott. I did not mention him.
Yeah, and he's the guy I really worry about, obviously cleaning up from those pass defenders. But the question I have is how do you attack the defense itself? If you look at the last playoff game, Darius Slayton had averaged 22 yards per catch. That's more than A.J. Brown. And Hodgins had 13.1. But I think the key to this is Saquon Barkley in regards to receiving, not necessarily running, because he averaged 11.2 yards every time he touched the ball receiving. So if you're attacking a defense like that, I think Wink Martindale will come up with a plan for the offense.
Yeah, but Scott, I will say this. I think the plan's going to be very different than it was against Minnesota.
Right, I do too. If you remember last week, we talked about I talked to you about whether they would rush 4 or they would blitz, and they only rushed 4 or even 3. And I think Dexter Lawrence is so good. He beat 2 guys. So I think Lance's point is very well taken that Leonard Williams will play a big role in this game. But attacking the defense itself, do you believe that the Giants will have to do some wildcat plays, some trick plays, in order to get people off guard with a defense like this? And also their receivers, I think Richie James might play a really big role.
Yep.
And I think the way to attack them is not the short passing, but see if they can get moderate passing. I mean 10 to 20 yards. Instead of like these little 3 or 4 yard attempts, which I don't think is really going to help them.
Well, I mean, Scott, I think you always want the explosive play, but I'll go back to what John was hinting at.
Sure.
Attacking a Vikings secondary that doesn't have James Bradbury, Darius Slay, and C.J. Gardner-Johnson is night and day compared to what you now have to go up against.
I mean, I will literally say, passing yards allowed per game, the Eagles are 2, the Vikings are 31.
So, I mean, you could have dreams of grandeur saying, sure, take shots deep down the field. I think you're asking for trouble.
Well, in fairness, he was only saying in the 10 to 15-yard area.
Well, but that's still pressing the envelope a little bit more, and you're going to give those secondary guys an opportunity to make plays on the ball, remember, and they're very good in that department.
True.
You already know this, but Green Bay scored 33 points on them, even though Philadelphia won, and Dallas scored 40 points
Well, first of all, did you watch that Philadelphia-Green Bay game, that night game? Okay, the Philadelphia Eagles ran the living crap out of the ball down their throats.
Right.
Okay.
That was also the game that what's his name got hurt in, Aaron Rodgers too. So the point being is they can be scored on. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I'm looking strategically. What kind of plays are they going to have to run in order to make a dent in that defense? Because they are, as you've already alluded to, one of the better defensive teams in the league.
Well,
and I'll take your answers off
and
here.
No, I appreciate it, Scott. Thanks for the call.
And, Scott, I agree with you. I agree with you that the onus is on the offense. I've been saying that since the regular season ended.
Yes, you're right.
I don't care what the defense does now that we're in the playoffs. It's all about, can the offense put up 31 like they did against the Vikings? I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but that's what you need to do. You now are going up against higher caliber offenses. You can't expect Wink Martindale and the defense, as good as they've been, to just simply hold everybody to 15 to 20 points and you get 21 and you walk out of Philadelphia with a win. It just doesn't work like that in the postseason. So absolutely, I'm completely with you. This is all about the offense. The offense needs to put together lengthy drives. They need to finish. They need to steal maybe a possession or two away from Philadelphia, 100%. But that doesn't mean that what worked against Minnesota, you just box up and travel to Philadelphia with.
Yeah, and I honestly don't think that's where Scott was going. But the question is, what should the approach be? And I think you hit it. I think quick game in the passing game is big here, in addition to running the ball at Barkley. You know, get some slants in when you catch the Eagles in some of those zone coverages, run some quick slants, run some quick passes before they can close if they're not going to press at the line of scrimmage. And if they're going to press you at the line, you are going to have to try to beat them over the top, right? It's hard to beat press with short passes. If teams are going to press you and get in your face and play single high, the only way you get them out of that is by going over the top. And you could do, you don't need a lot of time for those either, right? That could be 3-step, quick fade route.
And you
15,
want to avoid giving
the
them time to get to the quarterback.
Like,
clearly.
for example, last week, to your point, Lance, and this is why I think Lance brought it up, Scott mentioned Darius Slayton was like 19 yards per catch, whatever the stat was, right? Well, he got all those catches on those deep over routes. You need 3 or 4 seconds for those routes to develop. He's coming all the way from one side of the field and crossing all the way to the other side of the field. You know what you don't have against the Eagles pass rush? 3 or 4 seconds. So, correct. You're going to have to do it a little bit differently. That doesn't mean you can't, again, take those quick 3-step fade, seam, quick stuff down the field. You can try to do some of that. You obviously can't do that every time, because then they'll start reading it. They'll bring a safety over, and they'll start getting some takeaways, right? So I think it's quick passing game. I think it's Saquon in the running game. And I think, again, Daniel's going to have to run the ball in this game. I'm not saying they need to do 15 design runs with him. In fact, I'm still not a huge fan of the quarterback design run. I like it as a counter to Barkley, but I think Daniel had more design runs for him than Saquon did against the Vikings last week, or at least it was close. I think if you take the kneels downs out, I think Saquon might have had 1 or 2 more. But that shouldn't be even for me, right? I think Saquon needs to be And then if they start keying on Barkley, read option, keeper, naked boot, keeper, that's when Daniel starts, hitting his gaps, hitting his holes. And the Eagles have had some issues earlier in the year against running quarterbacks. We've seen this year. So I think that's a big deal. And I think that's how you kind of have to approach it offensively here. And look, you can score on the Eagles. Scott made a good point. The Packer game was a weird game, but I
don't think that's a great example, is all I'm saying.
I think the Dallas game was a better example.
Sure, Dallas is a good example.
Now, so I think
that was a highly competitive game.
Right, and Dallas did a little everything in that game. They threw for 300. They ran for 115 in that game. So if you could do that, I think you're, in good shape. But again, I think that's when that was Dallas playing one of their best games of the year. And we've seen Dallas when they play their best game, they're really tough to stop. So, that's how I think you have to approach it offensively. But, it's going to be very difficult because their defense is very, very good, especially up front.
Well, they can ruin games, those guys up front. And I just don't think it's necessary to give them a chance to make their jobs easier by, once again, holding onto the ball and letting these big plays try to develop down the field. So the run game, the short passing game, I think is the way to go. Don't allow them to get opportunities to get their hands on Daniel Jones. And then, to your point, if the Eagles, since those guys could tend to be a little bit aggressive, when they start to overcommit because they're so hungry to get after Daniel, that's when all of a sudden you work in a little misdirection and Jones maybe can get into the middle of the field or the second layers of the defense, because they got Saquon to the second layer of the Minnesota defense, especially on that rushing touchdown early in the game. And you like Saquon's chances.
And talking about misdirection, by the way, the Breida jet sweep action brought 3 players out of the play, which created all that space.
100%. But you got to that point because of Daniel's presence and all the other things leading up to that run. And that's what I think the Giants should do again against Philadelphia. But you'll take your chances. Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley against a linebacker or a safety. Hey, let's see if they can win those one-on-one battles. Because if I'm the Giants and you look at the Philadelphia personnel, well, who are guys that I want to get out into the open field to see if I can win? You'll take your chances on a T.J. Edwards and a Kaiser White. I know we were talking about T.J. Edwards, solid player, good tackler, but would you rather take a chance against him, or would you rather give the pass rushers an opportunity to come after you? I'll take my chances attacking the middle of the field, seeing what the linebackers could do. I don't know, when it comes to the Eagles secondary, now that C.J. Gardner-Johnson is taking over for Avonte Maddox, I don't know if there's that third corner that, to me, is somebody that the Giants can absolutely say, if we go after this guy, we have a very attractive matchup here.
Yeah, now Gardner-Johnson was basically the slot corner for the Saints before he came to the Eagles. Yep. So he's very familiar with the position.
He's been exposed to that.
But I do think, and a caller brought this up earlier and I forgot to comment on, I think Richie James could be a factor in this game. You try to get rid of the ball quick, slot guy. Quick moves, quick option routes, quick outs, little slants, try to play off whatever the defense's leverage is, and I think he can make some plays. And I'll leave it here before we get to your next call. Daniel Jones as a scrambler in this game is going to be essential. You talk about in those third and reasonables. Well, even if that Eagles pass rush wins, if Daniel can slip out that B-cap, slip around the corner, maybe the Eagles get a little undisciplined in their pass rush and they leave some gaps in there, and you can't get open against Bradbury or Slay, and you struggle getting separation. Well, those Daniel Jones runs can create first downs that can extend drives and lead to points. I think they're going to be critical in this game, and I think they're absolutely necessary if the Giants are going to score enough points for them to win. Jones's legs as a scrambler, I think, are going to be essential here if the Giants are going to do enough against this Eagles defense to win the game.
Well, it's almost a mirror image of Philadelphia. If Jalen Hurts is going to stress you out because of his capacity to run the football, right, then you should serve it right back to the Philadelphia defense because you know what that can do. How you now have to account for running backs, quarterbacks, and on any given play, them deciding to run. So you go back to that Vikings game, Daniel Jones, who had a marvelous performance overall as both a passer and a runner, but if you're going to pick one facet of his game that I think really wreaked havoc against Minnesota, it's the volume of runs and his success on the ground. So see if Philadelphia learned anything from the film that Minnesota failed to do, because I think that could be huge. Now, granted, 17 runs, and you were hitting on this earlier, there were a few kneel downs, so he didn't technically run the ball 17 times.
3 kneel downs and 2 quarterback sneaks were in
but
there,
still, that was still in that season-high territory for him. I mean, we've seen him run the football double-digit, or at least have double-digit runs, I should say, because sometimes, once again, they're kneel downs here or there. But that was a bit of uncharted territory against the Minnesota Vikings. We had seen a stretch of games where Daniel Jones just was not a factor on the ground. They brought that wrinkle back, and part of that, I think, was matchup and what they saw on film with the Vikings. But even though the Eagles are different, I would always want to see, does an opponent learn their lesson from the previous guy, to see whether or not, if we bring it back again, are they going to be caught off guard, or did they have a game plan in place so that our quarterback can't run wild? I would test Philadelphia early, see what they can adjust from that point on.
201-939-4513. Hey, Giant fans, the Giants' official connected TV streaming app, Giants TV, brings original video content and game highlights on demand and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV is free on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire TV, and the Giants mobile app. Big Blue Kickoff Live is brought to you by Pepsi Zero Sugar, new and improved, zero never tasted so good. Andrew in Virginia is up next. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, guys. Love the show all year.
Thank you.
Just a comment and a question. If people need any more animosity against the Eagle fans, just listen to Paul's One Giant Step broadcast. I interviewed 2 jerk Eagle fans, and so that'll just fuel your fire if you need something for the weekend. And then a question, who is the best ping pong player in the locker room, and who's the best staff ping pong player in the locker room? Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it. I have no idea who the best staff ping pong player is, and they play ping pong in that locker room every day when we do media avail. So I've kind of watched everybody play.
Saquon and Davis Webb got into one the other day.
I think Davis Webb or David Sills are probably the 2 best ping pong players. But I'll tell you what, Saquon held his own against Davis yesterday. It was very impressive. I would say Sills or Webb would be the 2 best ping pong players. Watching Davis Webb, that dude definitely had a ping pong table in his basement as a kid. No question.
Well, Saquon's ultra competitive in that
Oh,
department.
my gosh. He was into it, man.
Man, he does not like losing or falling in that department. I will tell you that.
No, he's into it.
Oh, he's 100% into that. So if you're worried about them not getting amped up or finding other ways to develop competition, I would say the ping pong absolutely answers that call. By the way, what was the reference that Paul spoke to a bunch of Eagles fans? Did I miss something?
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
What was that all
I
about?
think it might be the other podcast on a different
Oh,
network.
okay. I thought, like, Dottino talking to Eagles fans? I'm like, you got to be kidding me. There's no way that happened. Throwing Paul Dottino going out of his way to talk to a pair of Eagles fans? I want to see the videotape. Give me the evidence that exists. There's no way that happened. So that's why I was completely lost with that reference.
Let's go down to Florida to say what's up to Pete. Pete, what's going on?
Hey, John, Lance, good to talk to you again.
Hey.
It's been a couple of weeks. I wanted to call on Monday about an idea I had, more of a question I had about the possibility of spying Jalen Hurts on defense. And then I myself thought about what player would be suited for that. The best tackler on a team, or one of the best tacklers would be Landon Collins. So my question was,
I'll buy that.
Yeah, okay. So if we decide to commit to that on X amount number of plays, what possible voids does that leave it on downfield, by doing that? It's taking one player and isolating him. Can you guys explain that to me?
Not Pete. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Pete. Finish up.
No, I just want to say, because the funny thing was, I swear, I was going to call and ask this on Monday. Then I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday. Paul actually said the same thing I'm suggesting, like Landon Collins spying Jalen Hurts. So I thought it was pretty cool that what I was thinking, he was thinking the same thing. But so now I have a chance to ask the question. I'm just concerned about if we do that, I think it's great. But what does that do? What possible holes are opening up and downfield?
That is a great question, Pete, and thanks for the call. You can listen off the air. And I think that's the concern, right? Because you're essentially are taking a player out of either your coverage or out of your blitz if you're going to spy Jalen Hurts. And you're, in effect, then playing 10 on 10, right? Because usually you don't account for the quarterback, and then you're basically playing 11 on 10 playing the game, right? So if you're going to still try to blitz 5 and you're going to spy Jalen Hurts, well, just do the math. Then you're down to 5 guys in coverage. Well, how many guys are the Eagles going to release in coverage, right? Well, if the Eagles are only going to protect against 5 rushers with their 5 offensive linemen, then you're essentially covering 5 guys with 5 players, right? That's the math. That's the math. And that means no safety help. That's essentially zero coverage. If you're using one person to spy Hurts, you're rushing 5 and they're blocking those 5 with 5, one-on-one, you're essentially in zero coverage. That's a problem for me. No thank you. The Giants have done a good job of preventing big plays all year. You go into zero coverage against A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, Jalen Hurts will literally just throw the ball deep.
Yeah, he'll give those guys opportunities to make plays.
Especially A.J. Brown, because he's 230 and he's 6'2", and he'll basically just manhandle guys that are trying to cover him. So don't like that idea. Let's crumple that up and let's throw that into the garbage can. All right? Maybe you rush 4 then. Then you have a single high safety to give a little help. And then you're playing, underneath that, or then you could play a, cover 3 zone, something like that. That's a little bit more palatable, maybe. Maybe that's something you can do. So, yes, you can spy Hurts, but what makes it so difficult, then you're manning up somewhere, right? You're either manning up Brown, you're manning up Smith, or you're manning up Goddard. Those are not great one-on-one matchups for your guys. And I think you can use Tony Jefferson if you want to probably spy Hurts still. Those would be the 2 guys. I think those are the right names. Or Julian Love, if you want to go that way. You can go that way too, whatever. Maybe even Darnay Holmes with the way he tackles. If you want to spy him with him, you can do that too.
Jared Davis?
Yeah, maybe not fast enough.
No, okay, but at least I think has the discipline to stay in the ballpark.
Sure. So, look, that's a way to go about it. But if you're spying, you're usually playing man, first and foremost. Because you're playing zone, you're already looking at the quarterback, so you theoretically don't have to spy, right? So if you're playing a spy, you're playing man, I think it really limits your ability to pressure and blitz if you're spying. Because like I mentioned, if you blitz and you spy, you're basically in man-on-man down the field. And I think that's when you start getting into difficult situations. So I think you got to pick your spots. I think 3rd and longs and stuff like that are times you can do that, because then you force Hurts to kind of get rid of the ball quickly and you take away those scrambles for first down situations. So, yeah, I think there are spots for it, but I don't think that can be an every down type of scenario for you.
Well, also you go back to the fact that if Wink played a lot of zone against Minnesota, what does he look at Philadelphia in comparison to Minnesota personnel-wise? You've got A.J. Brown, you got Devontae Smith, you got Dallas Goedert, you got Quez Watkins. It's very similar firepower. So
I would argue more, to be honest.
I mean, listen, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, T.J. Hawkinson, Irv Smith. I mean, we're really talking about thin lines here.
But
both teams are really good.
I do think the Eagles' offensive line is better.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think you feel a lot better, and I think this is probably why Wink did it, right? He felt better about the Giants' 4-man rush beating the Vikings' offensive line than he would the Eagles'
Absolutely
offensive
no.
line.
I think that's a great point. So does he feel like he needs some assistance for his guys up front? But then again, you then all of a sudden leave guys on the back end out to dry.
And that's why the Eagles are tough to defend, by the way.
Correct. Now, here's the other thing that's interesting to bring up. They played the Ravens earlier this season when Lamar Jackson was healthy, and Lamar had a big game on the ground. I don't remember exactly whether or not it looked like he had somebody shadowing Lamar. I mean, clearly if they did, it wasn't successful.
On some plays he did. I'd have to look at it.
No, the reason I'm bringing that up is because I look at the Jalen Hurts-Lamar comparison. I'm not saying they're identical, but the schemes, the way they use the quarterbacks with the running game, I think is somewhat similar. So if you want to look at the approach to Philadelphia now, but here's the difference. Baltimore doesn't present the receiving core.
Not even
Philadelphia
close.
does. So see, this is why it's very hard to get a read on Wink and say, oh, well, he did this against this personnel grouping, so he's absolutely going to do this against this group. Well, there's so many different dynamics that change. But Lamar, to me, is the best example of, well, how did he approach that? And I don't think he shadowed him consistently. And Lamar, once again, took off a lot. And you go back to that game, not only did they have success with Lamar, Kenyon Drake had a monster game in that contest.
Yeah. And that's why, Lance, I don't think you can use one strategy in this game. I don't think you can say, well, this is a weakness for Philly that we can exploit and go after it. You kind of try to pick your poison on each play and hope you time it well based on what the Eagles are trying to do on those plays. And I think that's something Wink and the Giants coaching staff on both sides of the ball have been good at this year. Learning the tendencies of the other team and calling plays or defenses or schemes on offense to try to take advantage of that. And I think they've been good at it this season, to be quite honest with you. And that's what they're going to have to do here. One play, maybe you have 2 safeties deep and you play a softer zone. The next play, you bring an extra guy and you play press man. The next play, maybe you run a cover 3. You run a zone blitz on another play. They can do so many different things, and they've played every type of defense this year, which is the good part. So I think they do have a lot in their bag that they can go to. And you try to confuse Jalen Hurts a little bit, make him hold the ball a little bit. and you hope to get their offense out of sync. It's just not going to be easy because the Eagles' offense is really talented and really good. And like Lance, if you were to try to say, like, what's the Eagles' weakness on offense? Like, what? I don't even have an answer for that. What are they bad at?
Well, they can run the ball, they can throw the ball, they can pass protect. So, I mean, to me, it would be Jalen Hurts if his shoulder's not 100%. There's the weakness.
Right, yeah.
So you're talking about an ailment for one of their key players. That's the weakness.
I know.
And can you target that, get some hits on him, or maybe put him in a situation where he has a little bit more confidence in his shoulder than the reality presents, and he tries to airmail one. For example, you got the interception from Dane Belton, right, in the red zone. Okay? Can you come up with that type of a play? That would be my response.
Yeah, I think the best way to beat Philadelphia, and they did this at the beginning of last year when they tried to pass the ball, I think, way too much. If you go back to the 2021 season, the first half of that year before they kind of figured things out.
Well, they evolved because of injuries on the offensive line too, remember?
Correct.
Dictated that.
So if you can turn the Eagles into a passing team, and as much as Jalen Hurts has improved as a passer, and he's, again, MVP candidate, really good player. If you could turn them into a passing team and take the run game out of the equation somehow, now that's much easier said than done. I think that's probably your best shot, because then maybe you get a couple interceptions, things like that. Maybe his shoulder doesn't have the arm strength, blah, blah, blah. That's what I think you have to do, because I think the Eagles would be very content here to rush for 250 again and, go home and say what you want. As good as the Giants have been, defending against some of the passes the last few games, they still haven't faced a really good running attack in quite a while either. So how are they going to deal with the Eagles' run game, which is a totally different animal than what they've seen the last few weeks?
Well, and it's interesting. We're looking at issues during the season. The Eagles lost 3 games, okay? The Commanders, the Cowboys, and the Saints. But keep in mind, Jalen Hurts didn't play. No, they beat the Packers.
Oh, that's right.
So the one game that jumps out to me is the Commanders game on Monday Night Football, okay? But Washington ran the ball down the throats of the Eagles, okay, which the Giants are capable of doing, and that's why we're talking about that should be the strategy on offense. But the other thing that happened in that game, the Eagles turned the ball over like crazy, John.
Didn't they have 4 turnovers in that game?
And then in the Dallas game, too, the Eagles turned the ball over like crazy.
They had 3 or 4 in that game,
two
too.
of their 3 losses this season were abnormal in terms of turnovers. And you can never go into a game saying, oh, this is going to be the game where the Giants are going to get 5 takeaways. Listen, you'll take it if you can get it.
It could happen, but you can't game plan about that.
That's my point. Yeah. Like, you can't go in, and I have the breakdown of turnovers.
They had 4
They had 4 in each of those games.
2 losses.
New Orleans, they turned the ball over once. So we're talking about 2 of the 3 games they lost.
But Jalen Hurts didn't play in that game.
But he didn't play. But once again, he didn't play in the Dallas game either,
Right.
but it took 8 turnovers in 2 games for the Eagles to lose. That's what I'm saying. Perspective is needed in this conversation. It's not to say that the Giants can't win this game, but if the goal is we're just going to hope that we get a full moon out on Saturday night and Philadelphia coughs up the ball like crazy.
I don't know. And you know what? Honestly, listening to Giant fans call it, I think you guys have done a great job all week. I think Giant fans have really healthy respect for the Eagles team. I think they get it. They know this is going to be tough. They know they're going to have to play really well. We haven't gotten any of those calls like last week when they're like, oh, maybe you could blow out the Vikings and rest Daniel Jones for the second half of the game. We haven't gotten one of those this week, right? So,
By the way, stunner that it went to 1 possession down the stretch. Just absolutely stunning.
I know.
No one saw that coming.
Who could have guessed it?
Nah, tremendous.
All right, we got 3 minutes. I got to make sure you get these couple calls in. Ms. Pearson's going on the bus to Philadelphia today. We got to make sure he gets on that bus. Otherwise, we're going to be in big trouble.
Well, it is manageable to get to Philadelphia even without the team bus.
Yeah, but
just going to throw that in there.
I don't think on Pearson's second ever road trip he wants to miss the bus. Probably
No, I would not recommend that.
Yeah, let's go to Ray in Mercer County. He's up next. Hey, Rick. Hey, Ray.
Hi, gentlemen. Thank you for a fun and informative show throughout a very fun season. I had a question with a possible suggestion on officiating, and then a suggestion for Eagles game strategy.
Okay.
On officiating, this is going to be an emotional, passionate environment. And we've seen teams get burned by unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. And, the Giants, I think, very unfairly that happened to them in the first Washington game. And much more recently, we saw the episode with the San Diego Chargers and the helmet flinging that was pivotal. We saw the Green Bay Packers player ejected for shoving a sideline player.
Yep, what's your point, Ray?
Does the coaching staff sort of make a compilation of these sorts of things and maybe show them for 30 seconds or a minute.
Yeah, I can tell you, Ray, for sure, they will take things that happen around the league and show them to the team as teach tape. Absolutely, they do that, 100%.
I mean, Thomas McGahee does it when there's a special teams unique play. He always uses it as a teachable moment for his unit.
Good. The other suggestion I have, and it's sort of in the spirit of really liking the Saquon Barkley kickoff return suggestion somebody made on a previous show, but what about getting the Wildcat back into this game? Maybe on a full set of downs, or if it's working several series of downs, maybe on the second possession. Given that it spreads the defense out and you can create real confusion over who's going to take the snap.
Yeah, look, it wouldn't surprise me. I'm sorry, Ray. And thanks for the call. We're running into the show. I'm going to make sure we get our final caller in here. I think we could see some Wildcat in this game. I love what they did last week when they had, and again, people have been asking for more Barkley and Breda together. I think you can only get that for a handful of plays a game. 4 or 5. They run one in jet sweep motion. They'll do a fake handoff. They'll do a play action. Or they'll hand it off to one and then use misdirection on the other. I mentioned that's how Barkley got the long touchdown, right? Harrison Smith and both veteran linebackers, Jordan Hicks and Eric Kendricks, all followed Breda, which, by the way, I don't know why you would make that decision, on a jet sweep, and Saquon Barkley,
to think about,
and Saquon Barkley had a clear space. So, yes, I think you will see things like that to create some confusion and misdirection that could help you develop a play. That's why you use a lot of pre-snap motion. That's why you use formations that are interesting, because it creates hesitation in the defense for a potential to make some big plays.
Well, and also, once again, it makes them think.
Yep.
The hesitation is one thing, but you're guessing, okay, should I go right? Should I go left? Should I stick with my assignment? You want defensive players to think like that. Let them overguess.
And that's why you do some of the window dressing, no question. All right, Jeff in Rhode Island. We heard from Jeff in a while. Jeff, I'm happy you're a final caller heading into this big game. What do you got for us?
I'm still around, buddy. I'm still around.
I see your tweets. I know that, Jeff. I see your tweets.
No matter how the game turns out tomorrow night, I just got to say I'm just hugely so satisfied with the season, because none of us saw this coming for sure back in August. Nobody had a clue this was going to happen. And the other thing I got for you is the only tune I want to hear tomorrow night around 11:30 is "Die Eagles Die." So let's go Giants, okay?
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, I think that's one tune that nobody wants to be hearing, the Eagles fight song a lot on Saturday night, because that would be a bad thing.
I would assume so. Yes.
Absolutely. Jeff, good stuff. It's good to hear from you, man. Thank you for the call. Fans, you did a great job all week. Thanks for hanging with us. Thanks for sticking with us on Big Blue Kickoff Live and our other shows in our Giants Podcast Network. We appreciate you being with us. Big Blue Kickoff Live is brought to you by Pepsi Zero Sugar. New and improved. Zero never tasted so good. No BBK tomorrow, but if you want to check out some of our content, make sure you tune in to WFAN at 6:15 for our pregame show. Lance Medow, myself, Jonathan Casillas, Paul Dottino will get you ready for game time for a 2-hour pregame, and then we'll be with you 2 hours after the game with Brian Dable at the podium, all the reaction from the locker room. Lance and Jonathan will have all the analysis from WFAN Studios for 2 hours after the game. So make sure you go check that out on WFAN or go to WFAN.com or the Odyssey app to listen in. For Lance Medow, I'm John Schmeelk. Thank you so much for being with us. Enjoy the game this weekend, everybody, and hopefully we'll have a happy Monday here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. We'll see you then.